Chapter 2069, Strange, 1. Enchanting was still thinking of ways to wake little Yuyun and little Luo Shui, but nothing was working. According to Ning Luo, the only way to break them out of the ancient Yu clan's control was to kill the one controlling them, Elder Yuan. But he had escaped after the previous battle. At this moment she had no idea where to find the ancient Yu clan after they had escaped. The only way to completely eradicate them was to borrow the Crimson League's power. Originally she had planned to use the Spirit of Chaos fragments as an excuse when talking to me, but there were some things that she had to smooth out first. In the past few days, Enchanting and Ning Luo had both been by little Yuyun's side. The little white tiger had followed her to do so as well, but noticed that her gaze had become strange over the past few days. Have you realized that your cultivation level has been increasing rapidly? Enchanting was speechless. How had she not noticed? Ever since returning from the underground world, her power had been growing rapidly. Perhaps. Was this all due to little Yuyun's spiritual abode? The more she understood the power of the spiritual abode, the more she was sure that if little Yuyun's identity was exposed, it would create a lot of trouble. Even the Crimson League may take action. Because of this, she could only hide little Yuyun. Even the Temple of Shadows didn't know that she had brought back 2 children. In the short span of a few days, Enchanting's cultivation level had risen by a few levels and she had reached the 7th Holy Venerate level. She was extremely happy with the rise in her power. She sensed that the reason she could absorb the power so quickly without the fear of combusting was due to the deity ocean within her. Every time little Yuyun's spiritual abode pumped power into her body, the deity ocean would release a wave of power as well, integrating the power into her body. With her current power, there was no one more powerful than her in the central mainland save for those youths who had received power from the spiritual abode and ate the flesh of the demon cubs. After a few days of strategizing, Enchanting prepared to talk to me about her plan to eradicate the ancient Yu clan. But just as she entered the main hall, she saw a long shadow stretched out in front of her. In front of her was the mysterious boy who had appeared beside me the other day. He seemed to have followed the Crimson League to the Temple of Shadows. Although she had tried probing me a few times about his identity, me had never revealed anything about him, which made her all the more curious. She looked at him and nodded slightly, preparing to leave, but as they brushed past each other, he suddenly raised his hands to stop her. "Do you need me for something?" She stopped in her tracks and looked at him. His gaze swept past her face, as though he was thinking of something. It would have been impossible for her not to sense something strange in his gaze. "I wonder if the Holy Lord is free today," he asked flatly. "I've heard great things about you and I hope you can give me some advice." Enchanting was speechless. What was going on? Chapter 2070, Strange, 2. Enchanting looked at the man in front of her in bewilderment. He wanted to challenge her. Enchanting was speechless. She didn't even know who he was. This was their first time interacting. And their first proper introduction. Was it going to be a challenge? Enchanting simply couldn't comprehend what was going on in his head. "Since you're Miss Friend, you're a guest at the Temple of Shadows. I don't have any reason to fight with you." Enchanting replied coldly. What kind of joke was this? Judging from how me treated him the previous time, she could already tell that he was a force to be reckoned with. Even Enchanting couldn't tell what level he was at with her current powers, he must be much more powerful than her. Though Enchanting had remarkable improvements recently, she wasn't daring enough to fight with a strong power from the second domain. The man was slightly dissatisfied when faced with her rejection, and it showed in how he knitted his brows. Enchanting didn't want to continue entertaining him. Wasn't this too strange? Who on earth would approach someone for a challenge as an introduction? Wasting no time, she moved to leave, but just as she stepped forward, she felt a gust of chilly air from behind. It was overbearing, even more so than me. Enchanting was alarmed. Whoosh! She instantly dodged. Right when Enchanting flew up, a beam of light flashed past the spot she originally stood at and pierced through the wall in the Temple of Shadows. Boom! A huge crack appeared in the wall. Enchanting was speechless. The walls in the Temple of Shadows were built with special materials. It would take at least 3 days of continuous bombing by tens of holy venerates to cause a crack in the wall. This man did that with a single move. Being shocked was an understatement. Holy Lord, please don't be humble. This is a rare opportunity, why won't you just take up the challenge? The man was devoid of emotion, and the moment he said that, he struck another move towards Enchanting. This speed was inhuman. He was so quick that Enchanting couldn't see anything. Enchanting couldn't even keep track of his shadow. She suddenly felt a twinge in her shoulder and flew away from the impact, spitting a mouthful of blood. He was so powerful. Even more powerful than anyone she had ever met. Enchanting could only suffer and broke out into a cold sweat. It seemed like he wasn't going to make any further move. He merely looked at Enchanting with his brows furrowed and with a complicated expression. Enchanting was stunned. She had improved, but she was nowhere as good as the real Holy Lord of Shadows. This man could tell. Enchanting couldn't help but feel uneasy when she recalled that the man was friends with me. Before Enchanting could do anything, the man left without a word. After stepping out of the temple, he simply vanished. Chapter 2071, Strange, 3, Me had no idea about what had just happened. He thought that it was weird when Enchanting told him that the man had left, but did not say anything else. Enchanting heaved a sigh of relief when she saw his reaction. It seemed as though he had really left without saying anything to me. She could vaguely tell from his words that he wasn't from the Crimson League and was from another force. Although she wanted to ask him for more information, me seemed to have no intention of saying more. I always get the feeling that he's very strange, and that his powers are greater than me, she said as she sat on a chair looking at Ling Yan. Who do you think would win between Ming Di and me? Ling Yan asked as he looked at her. Ming Di is probably still slightly stronger, she said after mentally comparing the both of them. Mi's power was astonishing while Ming Di's was overwhelming. Between the two of them, Ming Di still won by a little. Legend has said that Ming Di could fight with the Holy Lord of Shadows as equals, Ling Yan said. Enchanting frowned slightly. With that man's strength, even if he couldn't defeat the Holy Lord of Shadows, he wouldn't be far off. Did he just want to test her power? I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint him then, she said with a shrug. She was probably considered one of the strongest in the first domain right now, but was nothing in the second domain. Ling Yan laughed lightly and said, Miss Yi, you should stop worrying since he's already left. In my opinion, he's not going to tell this to the Crimson League. Perhaps he doesn't even have them in his considerations. I'm not worried that he'll inform the Crimson League. I can tell that even though me and he know each other, they're not that close, and there's no point in talking about me either. It's just that. I sensed something strange in his gaze towards me. Her lips twisted softly, not understanding the man's actions. Miss Yi, you don't have to worry about all of this. Shouldn't you think about how to deal with the ancient Yu clan? Ling Yan suddenly changed the topic. Enchanting looked at him, sensing a different meaning behind his words. The ancient Yu clan. Ling Yan nodded. You've already gotten little Yu Yun back, which means that they would have found out about the loss of the spiritual abode already. Their plans to recast the spirit of chaos have also been dashed. They've suffered huge losses, which means that they will be seeking their revenge soon. The ambition of the ancient Yu clan extended beyond the first domain, and the strongest chip they had was little Yu Yun, who could generate countless powerful youths. For them, getting the spirit of chaos would only add to their power. Even if they couldn't obtain it, it would only stop them temporarily. But losing little Yu Yun was a huge blow to them. They had lost many powerful youths in the previous battle. They wouldn't be able to make more powerful members without the spiritual abode. The reality was as Ling Yan had said. The ancient Yu clan had lost the previous battle and retreated to their last stronghold. Not only had they lost the entire underground world, but they had also lost a clan elder that was extremely important to them. At that moment, the ancient Yu clan elders were gathered at the main hall. The clan master who just entered the main hall had a dark expression as he stared down at them. I only left for a while. Look at how badly all of you handled this, he spat out with narrowed eyes. Chapter 2072, Counter 1. All of the elder had grim expressions as well. Any news of the Grand Elder? The clan master asked coldly. As the clan elders looked at each other, their expressions, if possible, became even more solemn. Clan master, the Grand Elder was no longer there when we went to the old palace, one of them said. Not here. What do you mean? The clan master's expression was cold. Clan master, we entered the secret passage after the Crimson League left but found signs that there were already people there. The Buddha statues guarding the place had all been destroyed as well, and it seemed that the Grand Elder had already been killed. Ridiculous. The clan master instantly smashed the head of the elder who spoke up. Fresh blood splattered all over his head. The whole hall fell silent. Where is the girl? He asked coldly. No one dared to reply to him in his anger, afraid that they would be the next victim. But their silence gave him his answer. Great, great, great. He burst out in laughter and shouted out 3 words. I guess both the Temple of Shadows and the Crimson League really do want to destroy us. The clan master's face was completely frosty now. The clan elders had ruined their plans of collecting all the Spirit of Chaos fragments, but now, even little Yu Yun had been taken away. This had destroyed all their plans. Clan master, should we recuperate first, then wait for the Crimson League to leave? Another person suggested. As it stood, they were no match for the Crimson League now since their power was way beyond their league. And with the loss of little Yu Yun, they were in deep trouble. They had no choice but to wait for the Crimson League to leave. Recuperate. The clan master let out another bark of cold laughter and continued, the ancient Yu clan has been planning this for years. How did they ruin our plans? Clan master, you mean? The clan master took a deep breath and closed his eyes gently. Where do you think I have been all this time? No one knew what he meant. I went to the second domain. Everyone froze at these words. The clan master had gone to the second domain. The Temple of Shadows borrowed power from the second domain to ruin our plans, so why can't I do the same? The clan master looked at all of them. We are not the only ones who want the Spirit of Chaos. Many forces in the second domain want it as well. The Crimson League is from the second domain, but there are many forces like them as well. We can't possibly let the Temple of Shadows go so easily now that they've ruined our plans for the Spirit of Chaos. No, the clan master said as his lips curved up into a cold smile. There was no way he was going to let them have what he couldn't obtain. I've discussed with the forces of the second domain. Chapter 2073, Counter 2, Elder Yuan. The clan master lifted his eyes to look at Elder Yuan, who was standing silently to one side. Yes, he said. Those 2 kids are under your control. Can you tell where they are? The clan master asked. He had to get little Yu Yun. The Spirit of Chaos could be let go of, but the spiritual abode couldn't belong to anyone else. I can vaguely sense that they're in the direction of the Temple of Shadows, but I'll need to get closer to narrow down the actual location. The clan master nodded slightly. All right, well, attack the Temple of Shadows directly. You'll be in charge of finding the children after that. He paused for a moment before continuing, Elder Yuan, you had better not disappoint me this time. A bead of cold sweat ran down Elder Yuan's forehead as he nodded. The Temple of Shadows and the Central Mainland had sent more people to the Central Mainland to look for the ancient Yu clan. But it was as though they had vanished from the entire mainland. There was no trace of them at all. Enchanting continued to keep the information about the spirit of chaos to herself, which only made the Crimson League's search for the ancient Yu clan even more frantically. From what I can see, the ancient Yu clan are already too scared to even show their face, so Holy Lord, you don't have to be too worried. The 8 tribe leaders were gathered in the main hall. They didn't think that the ancient Yu clan could cause any more trouble. As long as the Crimson League was still on the central mainland, the ancient Yu clan wouldn't show their faces. The 8 tribe leaders were more worried about rejoining the Crimson League. Holy Lord, since we've already rejoined the Crimson League, should we consider returning to the second domain after all of this is over? The demon tribe leader said eagerly. The 8 tribe leaders' strength was based on the amount of faith people had in them. When they were in the second domain, their powers made them have a huge following, which made them even stronger. But the faith they received had faded when they went to the first domain. The Temple of Shadows had been strong in the central mainland and they had received a lot of faith, which had sustained their power. But with the disappearance of the Holy Lord of Shadows and the desolation of the Temple of Shadows, they had lost much of their power and were now not even 1/10 of their previous strength. In their heyday when they were still in the second domain, just one stomp of their foot would be enough to make the first domain shake 3 times. How far they had fallen. Enchanting knew their intentions well and had several thoughts about going to the second domain as well. She had found some hints of her mother's identity in the mystic realm and knew that she was from the second domain. The only way she could find out more about her was to go there. Just as she was about to speak her mind, a sudden pain bloomed in her chest. The pain seared through her bones and brain and was so painful it felt as though her lungs and heart were being ripped apart. It was so bad that her vision turned black and she almost fell off the black bone throne. Fortunately, it only lasted for a little while. She swayed for a moment but stabilized herself almost immediately. You, the little white tiger looked at him strangely. The divine phoenix seal won't be able to suppress it much longer. He looked at the sleeping Enchanting and lifted his hand to wipe the sweat off her face. The little azure dragon's eyes were complicated as it looked at the situation unfolding in front of him. Ling Yan, how many lives did you think you have, to do something like this? Chapter 2075, The Disintegrating Seal, 2. When Enchanting finally came out of her stupor, 3 days had already passed. She felt a huge weight on her chest when she woke up and forced herself to look up. A fluffy, white thing was lying squarely on her chest. Enchanting was speechless. The little white tiger was in deep slumber when a force pushed it to the ground. Damn it, who did that? The little white tiger said fiercely, rolled on the ground. It lifted its eyes and saw an expressionless Enchanting staring at it. The little white tiger jumped onto the bed and exclaimed, "You're finally awake." She nodded. I was afraid I was going to die in my sleep if I didn't wake up. The little white tiger froze, asking, "What happened? Why would you die?" I thought I was going to be crushed to death. Enchanting twisted her lips and looked at the little white tiger's round body. Did you gain weight recently? A fierce glare was directed towards her. What are you saying? Who did you say gained weight? Don't spout rubbish. The little white tiger sucked in its stomach as it spoke, but its soft tummy still bulged out. No, that wasn't it. It hadn't gained weight, it had just grown up. The little white tiger was extremely dejected. It came from the race of white tigers and was the benchmark for all other fiend celestial beasts. He was supposed to have balanced bones and honed muscles. However, Enchanting rarely brought it out in the Temple of Shadows, and since it was the Holy Lord of Shadows' precious pet, everything it asked for was given to it. The bored little white tiger could only eat its loneliness away. It had also been moving around less, so gradually. Could it be blamed that Flab had started collecting around its stomach? Enchanting looked at the little white tiger and stuck out her hand to poke its soft tummy. "Stop it! You beast!" The little white tiger shouted as it clutched its stomach. "You damned woman, how dare you touch my stomach? What else would I do?" She looked at how round the little white tiger had gotten and confirmed that it had indeed gained weight. "Fiend celestial beasts don't get fat," the little white tiger argued as it turned pale. Enchanting felt that it was just deceiving itself. "How long have I been out for?" she asked as she got out of bed. 3 days. "You really know how to sleep," the little white tiger replied. 3 days, what happened to me? She frowned. Many things had happened extremely quickly that day and her memories were a mess. "Who knows?" the little white tiger said as it moved its gaze away. He kept silent about all that had happened when she was asleep and didn't mention Ling Yan and the heart of the heavenly Tao. Enchanting could sense that there was something more it wasn't saying. Even though the pain had been unbearable and it had already been 3 days, she still remembered what happened that day. Chapter 2076, Powerful Enemies, 1. Before she could figure out whether there was anything wrong with the divine phoenix seal, someone knocked on her door. "Holy Lord, me has something to discuss with you. He's waiting in the main hall." Shuefu's voice drifted in from the outside. Me was looking for her. Her heart jolted. It was probably something important if it made me so worried. Putting on her clothes, she picked up the plump, little white tiger and carried it outside with her. In the main hall, the Crimson League alien race people who were with me were already standing inside. They all glanced at her as she entered. The 8 tribe leaders and Ming Wang were inside as well. "Mo Yao, I have something to discuss with you." Miss Surreal voice was heavy. From his tone, she could tell that something bad had happened when she was sleeping. "What happened?" she asked. Me didn't speak up immediately and handed over a letter with the Crimson League's seal on it to her. She opened it and read the contents. A strange look flashed past her eyes. The Heavenly Wolf Sect. Enchanting looked at the contents of the letter and read out the familiar yet foreign words. The Heavenly Wolf Sect is one of the powers of the second domain. Even though they're not on the same mainland as us, they're nothing to scoff at. "This letter was delivered to me today," Me slowly said. The Heavenly Wolf Sect and the Crimson League were on par with each other. In the past, they did not interact with each other but got into a fight due to some conflict thousands of years ago. They fought many small and big battles, but in the end, it was still hard to determine the winner. The Crimson League had already sent people to infiltrate the Heavenly Wolf Sect and gather information. Even though the spies had been unable to enter the inner circle, they had still been able to find out some information. A few days prior, the Heavenly Wolf Sect had sent a small troop to the first domain. "Are you worried that the Heavenly Wolf Sect might go to the central mainland?" Enchanting asked. Me nodded. "It's not impossible. We had to be so secretive about coming to the first domain this time because letting the other powers know about the spirit of chaos would only make them flock here. The Crimson League had to obtain the spirit of chaos, but the Heavenly Wolf Sect had nothing to do with the first domain. It was extremely suspicious that they had suddenly sent people to the first domain at such a sensitive time." "Your worries might be true," she said. Me froze. It had only been a nagging suspicion in his mind without any evidence, but Enchanting's words seemed to suggest that she knew something more. "What do you mean?" She said, "When we were attacking the ancient Yu clan's underground world, I was informed that the city lord wasn't present. From what I know, he has not returned and seems to have vanished from the central mainland. She had many theories with regards to his disappearance, but now it seemed that it had coincided nicely with the actions of the Heavenly Wolf sect. Chapter 2077, Powerful Enemies, 2. What exactly in the first domain could have caught their attention to this extent? Enchanting couldn't think of anything else other than little Yu Yun and the spirit of chaos. The ancient Yu clan had suffered huge losses this time. Knowing them, they wouldn't take this lying down. It seemed like they were going to use the same tactic as Enchanting and use the spirit of chaos to goad the Heavenly Wolf sect into action. Just as she was talking to me, a Temple of Shadows guard ran up to report to her in a panic. Holy Lord of Shadows, about 100 meters away, there is a huge troop of soldiers and horses rushing towards us. We also saw several ancient Yu clan elders within the troops. Enchanting and me exchanged glances the moment they heard the news. Could you be right? I hope that I'm wrong. The faces of the 8 tribe leaders darkened. They were all from the second domain, so of course, they knew of the Heavenly Wolf sect. The Crimson League was formed by the top powers of the second domain, but the Heavenly Wolf sect consisted of all the villains. The Heavenly Wolf sect was made up of countless murderers and people with no regard for the rules. And they were all extremely powerful. The strongest, fiercest, and most powerful of them all was the leader. It was not an exaggeration to say that their reputation in the second domain was terrifying. This was a group that was difficult to deal with. That shouldn't be possible, right? What does the ancient Yu clan have to offer the Heavenly Wolf sect? The demon tribe leader said. You're right. There's no way the Heavenly Wolf sect would bother with a power from the first domain, the goblin tribe leader said. Ming Wang looked at the debating 8 tribe leaders and said, there's no way the Heavenly Wolf sect would have any interest in the ancient Yu clan, but they would definitely be interested in the spirit of chaos. And they were going up against the Crimson League, which they were already in conflict with. Knowing their character, they would probably take action. It was not a hopeful situation. Could you see who the ancient Yu clan was with? She asked the soldier. The soldier replied, they seem to be wearing black armor and their helmet is in the shape of a wolf head. This was enough for all of them to surmise. It's the Heavenly Wolf sect. Mi's voice was heavy. Baiji, gather our men immediately, he ordered. Since the ancient Yu clan was the one who had invited the Heavenly Wolf sect over, it meant that they already knew the size of their army. The Crimson League had not brought many people over to the Crimson League this time and would suffer huge losses if the Heavenly Wolf sect had come prepared. Baiji didn't dare waste any more time and went to prepare for the battle immediately. If the Heavenly Wolf sect were to attack us today, they won't rest until we're all dead. I didn't bring enough men this time. If we confront them, it will cause huge losses on our side. Even me, who was usually very proud of himself, couldn't express any words of confidence. Since they were old rivals, he knew their way of fighting well. Mo Yao, I'll leave you to take care of the manpower in the Temple of Shadows, Mi said before leaving. With the collapse of the ancient Yu clan's underground world, their power had disappeared and the remaining members had all scattered. As such, the ancient clans could finally be at peace. With the huge victory, they had all returned to their original homes, ready to make a comeback. Chapter 2078, Powerful Enemies, 3. The only people left in the Temple of Shadows were the Undead clan. Even the Jiang family had been sent back to their homes by Enchanting. Likewise, the North Star Demon Lord had left with the Demon clan as well. But a powerful enemy had suddenly appeared in front of them. After she had sent the 8 tribe leaders and Ming Wang away, she walked over to Ling Yan's room, kicked down his door, and dragged him out. She was clearly a head shorter than him but looked fierce as she dragged him away. Miss Yi. He was amused as she dragged him away, and the Azure Dragon hurried after them. Did she already notice? Is Ling Yan going to die? The Azure Dragon thought meanly. Enchanting didn't say a single word as she dragged Ling Yan into Ning Luo's room. Ning Luo was taking care of little Yu Yun in the room and looked at her in puzzlement as she entered. Seeing that everyone was there, she spoke up. You must all leave the Temple of Shadows right away. The further you go, the better. What? Ning Luo asked in shock. Wasting no time, Enchanting helped Ning Luo pack the medications for little Yu Yun as she said, the ancient Yu clan has roped in powers from the second domain to fight us and they're heading toward the Temple of Shadows right now. They're here for the spirit of chaos. Ning Luo, I'm leaving little Yu Yun and little Luo Shui in your care. I trust that you won't let them fall into anyone else's hands. As she said this, she stuffed the space ring which was full of items into his hands. Ning Luo looked at her strangely and said, What do you mean? You're going to stay here. With a smile, she only said, I'm the Holy Lord of Shadows. How could I leave? If she left, she wouldn't even have to worry about the Heavenly Wolf sect. The Crimson League would kill her first. Furthermore, the entire Temple of Shadows would be dragged into the mess. Ning Luo's eyes were complicated. But in the end, he decided to leave with little Yu Yun and little Luo Shui. Before he left, he said, Enchanting. She looked at him. You shouldn't die here. With that, he turned and left quickly. Seeing that Ning Luo had left with little Yu Yun and little Luo Shui, her lips curled up into a smile. Everyone in the First Mainland could be revived as long as little Yu Yun was safe. She had settled one problem. With that, she turned to Ling Yan who was behind her and said, You've heard everything that I've said. I don't need to say any more, do I? Ling Yan smiled slightly and said, Miss Yi wants me to leave. So why aren't you leaving? She said with a light laugh. Ling Yan had helped her too many times. She couldn't let him die here. As soon as the battle started, Ling Yan wouldn't be able to protect himself with his capabilities. I guess I have no choice but to respectfully obey, he said with a smile, immediately agreeing to her request without any hesitation. Enchanting was taken aback. This damned rascal. Couldn't he at least pretend a little? Go now, or you won't be able to leave once the battle starts. They were running out of time. The Heavenly Wolf sect was about to reach them and she left as soon as she heard his answer. Ling Yan smiled at her back and brought the Azure Dragon back to their room. After packing his possessions, he prepared to leave the Temple of Shadows. Chapter 2079, Heavenly Wolf Sect, 1. Little Azure Dragon looked at Ling Yan, who wasn't hesitant to leave, with a complicated expression. You're just going to leave like that? What else can I do? Ling Yan smiled. The Heavenly Wolf Sect came prepared. I don't think the Crimson League will be able to handle them. Enchanting will face danger. Aren't you afraid that she's going to die here? Little Azure Dragon couldn't figure out what was going on in Ling Yan's head. Ling Yan didn't respond. He merely lifted his head to look at the sky. Little Azure Dragon was perplexed. It just couldn't understand what Ling Yan was planning. He was already ready to die on her behalf, but now... What was Ling Yan plotting? 5,000 meters away from the Temple of Shadows. The troops rushed over and even the ground vibrated. The Crimson League and Temple of Shadows joined forces to form troops that gathered outside the entrance of the Temple of Shadows. The expressions on everyone's faces were somber. Various clans had learned that the ancient Yu clan was going to attack the second domain. The clans finally experienced some peace after the destruction of the ancient Yu clan's underground world and returned to where they belong. However, today they came together to face the last battle for the central mainland. If the Temple of Shadows were to lose, the clans would open the doors to revenge from the ancient Yu clan. This battle was a battle for their imminent survival. The sound of war drums rang. Everyone lifted their heads, only to see countless soldiers charge over, almost drowning them. Suddenly they heard a roar from above. Lifting their heads, they noticed numerous flying mounts that soared in the sky. Enchanting looked at the Heavenly Wolf sect and the ancient Yu clan's army, and her heart sank, while she tried to look at me with her peripheral vision. Though she couldn't see his face, she could sense from his cold aura that he probably felt the same way as her. Is that Lu Xiao, one of the 12 sect custodians from the Heavenly Wolf sect? Baiji's eyes narrowed when she saw a handsome man riding on the back of a huge demonic beast among the Heavenly Wolf sect's troops. Shui Mao is here too. The Crimson League had bad ties with the Heavenly Wolf sect for a long time already. They naturally knew who were the powerful ones in the Heavenly Wolf sect. When the Crimson League saw the Heavenly Wolf sect send their elites over, they couldn't help but feel even moodier. As one of the 12 sect custodians, his powers were akin to that of the Deputy League Chief. That meant that he was a strong opponent, even in the second domain. Although me and Baiji were considerably powerful among the Crimson League, they weren't as powerful as the Deputy League Chief. The Heavenly Wolf sect has planned things thoroughly. It seems like they want to get rid of us with just one attempt. Baiji grit her teeth angrily before she continued, I've sent someone to relay the news to the second domain. With the 2 sect custodians leading them, we shouldn't fight them yet. Why don't we wait for the reinforcements to arrive before starting the battle? Mi shook his head. There won't be any reinforcements. What? Baiji was stunned. Enchanting remained calm, she had the exact thoughts. The Heavenly Wolf sect obviously won't leave any chances for us. They might have already taken action and arranged something in the second domain to interrupt our plans. If not, why wouldn't the Crimson League send any help even though they should have learned of the news earlier than us? Chapter 2080, Heavenly Wolf Sect, 2. Enchanting knew from the start that the reinforcements from the Crimson League had been interrupted by the Heavenly Wolf sect. They wouldn't be able to come and help them out in the first domain. Baiji's expression darkened. What are the chances of winning over the 2 sect custodians? Baiji could only pin her hopes on me, who was the most powerful out of them. Mi replied, if I were to just pick one of them to battle, there's only a 10% chance of winning. Mi's reply made the sticky situation even worse. Mo Yao, you handle the 2 sect custodians with Ming Di. Mi's gaze landed on Enchanting. Enchanting was speechless. What did he just say? Mi hadn't noticed anything wrong with Enchanting yet, so he continued, you have been hiding your capabilities from others. Even now, I still haven't figured out how powerful you are. I lost when I challenged you 10,000 years ago. Now, we can only count on you and Ming Di as our last hope. She remained silent. She hadn't expected the Holy Lord of Shadows to be that powerful. As she had witnessed Mi's powers before. To think that even Mi wasn't the Holy Lord of Shadows' match. Hearing from Mi, the 2 sect custodians were capable of destroying him and Baiji. Her powers. It was clear that her holy venerate powers weren't enough. She wanted to defeat them too, but she wasn't capable of doing so. A deep sense of despair filled her. It was really difficult to pose as the Holy Lord of Shadows, not just anyone was capable of doing it. As Mi and Enchanting were discussing their strategy, the ancient Yu clan and the Heavenly Wolf sect's army were almost upon them. The 2 people leading in front were the 2 sect custodians. Lu Xiao and Shui Mao. I was thinking who the Crimson League would send. It turns out it's Mi and Baiji, a woman with an ethereal appearance approached. She scanned the Crimson League's army with her eyes, and when she noticed Mi and Baiji, the corners of her lips hitched up. Elder Yuan stood beside Lu Xiao and Shui Mao. When he heard Shui Mao's words, his heart almost skipped a beat. He had seen me and Bai Ji's capabilities with his own eyes. Even the elite youths that were trained by the ancient Yu clan weren't able to hold in for long when they fought against them. They were that powerful, but they sounded pathetic when Shui Mao talked about them. Elder Yuan couldn't help but turn to look at the clan master. A smile was on the clan master's face. The Heavenly Wolf Sect's powers are comparable to the Crimson League in the second domain. Moreover, the Heavenly Wolf Sect has expanded over the years and is capable of defeating the Crimson League, Clan Master said. While the Clan Master was talking, Lu Xiao suddenly lifted his arm. A glimmer of light appeared on his palm, transforming into a sharp sword, and he waved it with light movements. The sword aura started acting on the Crimson League's army. Boom! The ground was split into two halves and a huge crack appeared in the middle. It only took one moment and the various clans were flabbergasted by the sword's alarming power. Even then Lu Xiao had a poker face on. He merely looked at me, who stood at the front of the army, and spoke with a calm voice. Hand over the fragments of the spirit of chaos and I can consider leaving your corpse intact in one whole piece. Chapter 2081, Heavenly Wolf Sect, 3, The deathly aura surrounding me was intensifying. The move was merely a warning, but Lu Xiao clearly demonstrated his great powers. Even me wouldn't be confident when faced with Lu Xiao's one move. Lu Xiao was indeed someone to be reckoned with. No wonder the various clans from the second domain gathered together to fight him. He overpowered everyone from the Crimson League. Mo Yao, Mi suddenly called out. Return to the Temple of Shadows now and take the fragments of the Spirit of Chaos as well as the vessel with you. Mi took a deep breath. He previously thought that Mo Yao and Ming Di could at least try to fight the sect custodians. Now, Mi planned to just give up and stop struggling. With Lu Xiao's capabilities, there was no way they could overpower him. Even if victory was nowhere near, they would never hand over the fragments of the Spirit of Chaos to the Heavenly Wolf Sect. The Spirit of Chaos must return to the Crimson League. Enchanting could sense Mi's intentions and she lowered her eyes. The exact moment Mi finished speaking, Shui Mao made a move, unlike the patient Lu Xiao. She leaped and huge waves formed underneath her body. A huge water dragon appeared just like that. Xiao, don't be so impatient. Since we're already here in the first domain, why don't we have some fun first? A devious smile appeared on Shui Mao's face. Not only do I want the Spirit of Chaos, but I also want their lives too. The moment she finished her sentence, the water dragon started charging towards the Crimson League's army. When the water dragon charged over, vines as thick as human arms suddenly started bursting out of the ground and formed a huge protective net in front of the Crimson League's army. Boom! The water dragon collided into the huge protective net. Though the protective barrier appeared to be as tough as steel, it instantly shattered upon the impact of the water dragon. PSS. The moment the protective net shattered, Bai Ji suffered a counter-effect. She spat out a mouthful of blood. Mi acted quickly, lifting his arm to create gusts of black wind to entrap the water dragon. Even so, the water dragon moved about quickly without being affected and it formed counter-effects on him, causing havoc in his breath. The other Crimson League members quickly moved in to help and barely managed to put the water dragon under control. The satisfaction Shui Mao felt was apparent when she saw Crimson League mobilizing almost everyone just to handle a water dragon. The other ancient clans from the central mainland witnessed that too and they were all flabbergasted. So that was the real capabilities of the top powers from the second domain. They recalled that when the supposed strong powers from the second domain first came to the first domain, they just had to join forces to fight them and not suffer huge injuries. Now, they finally realized that those supposed strong powers from the second domain weren't even that powerful. When faced with real powers, they were just like ants that could be easily crushed. They didn't need anyone more. Just the 2 sect custodians from the Heavenly Wolf sect were enough to wipe them all out. Everyone was consumed in fear. The ancient Yu clan was in high spirits. Once they handed over the spirit of chaos to the Heavenly Wolf sect, they could secretly take little Yu Yun away. The Crimson League and Holy Lord of Shadows would be defeated and suffer a miserable loss. From then on, the central mainland would belong to them. The ancient Yu clan could eventually use little Yu Yun's spiritual abode to cultivate and attack the second domain when the time came. Then it would only be a matter of time before they became the most powerful clan. Chapter 2082, Instant Kill, 1, Roar. All of a sudden, a loud dragon's roar ripped the sky apart. Mi was too exhausted to even deal with it, but he suddenly spotted a huge figure that flew to attack the terrifying water dragon. Stunned, Mi quickly lifted his eyes to look up. All he could see was Enchanting riding on Mingdi's back. The water dragon started turning into water droplets that only glimmered under the sunlight. Enchanting was certain that if the Crimson League were to lose, the entire Temple of Shadows and Central Mainland would be taken away. Little Yu Yun was once taken away right in front of her. She was never going to let history repeat itself. Her foster father, her master. She had to do anything and everything to make them come back to this world. As Enchanting scanned the Temple of Shadows' undead clan and had a somewhat gentle gaze. Though she was forced into this role, it was undeniable that she kind of liked this damned undead clan. Shui Mao hadn't expected someone from the Crimson League to outdo the water dragon. She narrowed her eyes and tried to make another move, but was interrupted by Lu Xiao. Mo Yao, it's been long. Lu Xiao lifted his head, looking at Enchanting, who rode on the demon dragon's back. Tears trickled down Enchanting's cheeks. She looked at Lu Xiao from above without any expression on her face. He was one of the 12 sect custodians, and it turned out he was acquainted with the Holy Lord of Shadows. Enchanting had no idea how many more secrets the Holy Lord of Shadows kept. Lu Xiao clearly knew that it was the Holy Lord of Shadows, so he didn't allow Shui Mao to attack yet. I heard that you came to the first domain long ago. I didn't expect us to be able to meet again. Great, we can have some closure today. Lu Xiao had a sinister look on his face. Enchanting was shocked. Darn. So it turned out he had some bad blood with the Holy Lord of Shadows. Lu Xiao suddenly transformed into a beam of light, flying up the sky to charge towards Enchanting. Smoke and fire erupted into the skies as Mingdi instantly breathed hot air in his direction. Lu Xiao paused in the sky, holding a sharp sword to fight Enchanting. Enchanting was glad that she had Mingdi with her. When she was still thinking about it, Shui Mao flew up into the sky too. Let me deal with the demon dragon. Shui Mao smiled as she prepared her moves. I've got to give it to you for breaking down my water dragon earlier, but this time, I don't think you can last that long. Mingdi's eyes were filled with a murderous aura as he charged towards Shui Mao. Of course, Mingdi assumed the Holy Lord of Shadows wouldn't need his help. Enchanting was speechless. Calm down. Now there's no one to interrupt us. Lu Xiao glared at Enchanting with a murderous look. Chill. Enchanting looked at the murderous Lu Xiao and was filled with despair. Ah Yao. Ming Gu saw the dangerous situation and flew up. Ming Wang also followed right behind. Right as they were flying up, a few youths from the ancient Yu clan followed and interrupted them. Kill them. The ancient Yu clan's clan master ordered with a murderous look on his face. Once he gave the orders, almost everyone from the ancient Yu clan moved. The groans from the heavenly wolf-sex war beasts were never-ending. The horn signals rang and the heavenly wolf-sex army charged forward. It only took a moment and the heavenly wolf-sex army was in a chaotic skirmish to the death with the Crimson League's army. The beasts were all paying their respects. Enchanting was surrounded by the holy light and she felt like she was controlled by a certain force. She couldn't move even the slightest and lifted her eyes to look over. The two figures riding on the six-winged fire phoenix's back appeared before her eyes. One of them was the man who suddenly challenged her at the Temple of Shadows that day. What was going on? Enchanting was confused. When he saw that familiar face, his heart raced. Lu Xiao looked at the six-winged fire phoenix in front of him with narrowed eyes. He would have managed to kill Enchanting earlier if they hadn't come into the picture. Chapter 2084, Instant Kill, 3. With their appearance, Enchanting was saved. Were they sent by the Crimson League? Lu Xiao and Shui Mao instantly exchanged glances. They acted at the same time. Two powerful beams of light struck in the six-winged fire phoenix's direction. Right before it struck the two figures riding on the six-winged fire phoenix's back, a middle-aged man in his 40s looked over. With a wave of an arm, the two beams of light just vanished into nothing. Lu Xiao and Shui Mao's faces darkened. "What a hindrance," the man said. He looked at Lu Xiao and Shui Mao with displeasure, as though they were merely ashes that had landed on his sleeves. The next moment, he lifted his arm and a glimmering beam of golden light came out from his palm. It shot towards Lu Xiao and Shui Mao. Within seconds, the light penetrated through Lu Xiao and Shui Mao. They didn't even have a chance to retaliate and were burned into ashes in an instant. Even then the light didn't disappear. After shooting Lu Xiao and Shui Mao, it landed on the Heavenly Wolf sect and Ancient Yu clan's army, shining on them all. Every living creature that was shown by the light started turning into ashes. Everyone was stupefied. The Crimson League and members of the Central Mainland looked at the burnt piece of land in disbelief. Just a while ago, the Heavenly Wolf sect and Ancient Yu clan's army stood there. But now, all that was left behind was ashes. What kind of insanity is this? An ancient clan elder was almost breathless. There were hundreds of thousands of living creatures and this man just made one move to burn all of them into ashes. That made everyone's hair stand on end. If the light just slightly shone over, wouldn't they also die? Thump. Mi went down on his knees and bowed his head respectfully at the two figures riding on the six-winged fire phoenix, in front of everyone. "We welcome the supremacy." The entire Crimson League went down on their knees and bowed. The others from the Central Mainland didn't know who they were, but after witnessing their prowess, they knelt too. Enchanting was completely taken aback. She was only certain that they didn't belong to the Crimson League. Judging from his attitude, they certainly were much more powerful than the Crimson League. Enchanting was still guessing their identities when the holy light started forcing her towards the six-winged fire phoenix. "Elder, that's her." It was the young man that challenged her that day. He pointed Enchanting out to the elder after he saw her. The middle-aged man's gaze riveted on Enchanting's face. Once he saw her face, he couldn't help but furrow his brows, seemingly trying to recall something. "May I know?" Enchanting hadn't finished speaking. The holy light that surrounded her suddenly became gold chains that held her captive. Enchanting was speechless. What on earth was going on? Chapter 2085, Temple of Paragon, 1. Before the people from the Temple of Shadows had time to process what had just happened, the six-winged fire phoenix burst through the clouds and disappeared. Ah Yao. Minggu watched as Enchanting disappeared right in front of his eyes and took off after them. But only after a few meters, Mingdi suddenly spread open his wings and stopped him as well as Ming Wang, who had chased after him. Mingdi. Ming Wang frowned at him. I don't care if you die, but Mo Yao is going to be upset if you die in front of her. Ming Di sprayed fire from his mouth as he pinned Ming Wang and Ming Wang onto the ground with his claws. Ming Di, let go of me. Ming Gu said agitatedly. Ming Di flapped his wings but showed no signs of letting them go. You can't even escape from me, and you want to chase after them. Do you want to die? Ming Di said coldly. Don't say I didn't warn you. Even I am no match for the six-winged fire phoenix, let alone the two people on its back. Ming Gu and Ming Di were stunned. They had the impression all along that Ming Di was wildly arrogant, killing as he pleased in the second domain, with the only person he feared being the Holy Lord of Shadows. But he had just admitted that he was no match for the six-winged fire phoenix. Ming Di is right. They're not opponents you can take on. We don't know yet whether it's a good or bad thing that Mo Yao has been taken, but you will both die if you chase after them, Mi said as he got up. Who are they? Ming Wang's eyes were helpless as he lay pinned to the ground. Mi lifted his head slightly to look into the distance. The Temple of Paragon. The four words flowed out of Mi's mouth, making Ming Wang freeze in an instant. Ming Di sensed the change in him and quickly let him go. However, Minggu had no idea who they were. Once he was free, he quickly grabbed Ming Wang and flew after Enchanting. But this time, it was Ming Wang who grabbed his wrist and held him back. Brother. Minggu looked at Ming Wang with a strange expression. Ming Wang didn't say anything, only holding his brother's wrist tightly and not letting him leave. Are you sure? Ming Wang looked at me before his searching eyes landed on Ming Di. Ming Di spoke. I don't recognize the two people on its back, but I remember the six-winged fire phoenix. I fought 3 days and 3 nights with it and came out defeated in the end. After that, I heard that it had moved to the Temple of Paragon. It seems like Mi is telling the truth. There was no way Ming Di would have talked about his defeat if he wasn't afraid that Ming Wang was going to die if he went after them. All those years ago, Ming Di had been wreaking havoc all over the place, not holding any regard for any other creatures. But he had accidentally disturbed the six-winged fire phoenix's rest. He had made it sound nicer, saying that they had battled for 3 days and 3 nights. But in reality, he was the one who had been hunted by the six-winged fire phoenix for 3 days and 3 nights and almost died under the six-winged fire phoenix's fire. The Temple of Paragon. What's that? Brother, why aren't you going after Ah Yao? Minggu tried to get free, but it was useless. Ming Wang's expression was extremely grim. The Temple of Paragon is the top power in the second domain. Any single one of them can destroy the entire first domain. Ming Wang's voice was helpless. Chapter 2086, Temple of Paragon, 2. Ming Wang had never imagined that they would cross paths with the Temple of Paragon one day. Even though the Crimson League was a huge power in the second domain, the power of the Temple of Paragon was beyond them and they were an entity that normal people couldn't even dream of touching. The Crimson League probably wouldn't even be able to reach their front gate even if they all attacked together. For the first time in his life, Ming Wang was experiencing a huge gap in his abilities. Minggu was stunned. But Ah Yao, the Temple of Paragon has never come into contact with Mo Yao before. The mainland that the Temple of Paragon is at is different from the mainland that we are at as well, so maybe taking Mo Yao away is nothing bad after all, Mi said. But he had no idea why they had taken her. He was just glad that he knew someone from the Temple of Paragon. That person had for some reason appeared in the first domain and me had met him coincidentally when they were fighting the ancient Yu clan. But he had vanished suddenly after that, which made me extremely puzzled. However, given that he was from the Temple of Paragon, it meant he wasn't someone me could question easily. Ming Gu wanted to speak but Ming Wang pushed him forward. In front of them, the air was filled with ashes and the smell of burnt flesh. As Ming Gu looked at everything around him, he felt as though someone was squeezing his throat. The people from the Temple of Paragon had reduced the Heavenly Wolf sect and ancient Yu clan troops to ash with just a lift of their hand. What terrifying power! Seeing that Ming Gu was still in shock, Ming Wang sighed deeply and looked at me. The central mainland accepted us back previously, but now that everything in the central mainland has settled down, are we still allowed to return to the second domain? Me looked at Ming Wang. Even though Yi Qingtang had been taken away right in front of him, Ming Di was still here, which meant that they still qualified to return to the Crimson League. He nodded slightly. Ming Wang's eyes filled with determination. As long as they returned to the second domain, they might be able to see Yi Qingtang. On the mountain, a slim figure stood between the bamboo plants. He was looking at the scorched earth as well as the Crimson League and Temple of Shadows members discussing at the foot of the mountain. The Azure Dragon stood to the side looking at Ling Yan, who was the one standing among the bamboo plants. Ling Yan hadn't left like Yi Qingtang thought he did. He had brought the Azure Dragon to this mountain and personally witnessed the entire battle. Which meant he had seen with his own two eyes Yi Qingtang being taken away by the six-winged fire phoenix. After seeing all of this, he turned and walked back towards the Temple of Shadows. At this moment, the Crimson League troops and the Temple of Shadows forces were still on the battlefield and the Temple of Shadows was empty. He walked through the quiet main hall towards the underground path and walked to the Hall of Gloom. Lighting the fire on the wall, once again the almost illusionary pagoda appeared in front of him. The Azure Dragon looked at him strangely. But before he could speak, Ling Yan climbed onto the pagoda, opened the altar where the Spirit of Chaos was placed and put the fragments and the container inside. So you've had your eye on the Spirit of Chaos this entire time, Ling Yan. The Azure Dragon looked at Ling Yan with a complicated expression as he climbed up the pagoda. Chapter 2087, Temple of Paragon, 3. The little Azure Dragon finally understood why Ling Yan was doing all of this. It wasn't a coincidence that Ling Yan had appeared in the first mainland. Even the meeting with Yi Qingtang was planned. He had dragged her into his plan ever since the first time they had met. You asked her to impersonate the Holy Lord of Shadows because you already predicted that the ancient Yu clan would use the spiritual abode to try and take over the central mainland. And in that case, the Temple of Shadows would become everyone else's last hope. You were using her to collect the Spirit of Chaos fragments. The little Azure Dragon put together all the events that had occurred to date. Regardless of whether it was impersonating the Holy Lord of Shadows or seeking help from the Crimson League, weren't these all suggestions that Ling Yan had given her? The little Azure Dragon suddenly thought of something. No wonder. You didn't find it strange at all when she was taken away by the six-winged fire phoenix. Ling Yan, did you already know that this was going to happen? What exactly are you planning? Ling Yan looked at the little Azure Dragon coming to a realization and his lips curved into a slight smile. The Azure Dragon clan is known for their intelligence. In that case, why don't you try figuring out what I'm up to? The little Azure Dragon's mouth twitched. It was only up against him that their clan would take such a blow in their intelligence. Even if you did all of this for the Spirit of Chaos fragments, there's only half of them here. The others, the little Azure Dragon was about to remind Ling Yan of this when Ling Yan's calm expression made him realize something. He must know where the remaining fragments were hidden. Ling Yan, were you helping Yi Qingtang all this time solely for your own goals? Or were you really trying to help her? The little Azure Dragon asked. Ling Yan smiled. Take a guess. Ling Yan's smile was mysterious, but the little azure dragon's mind was working wildly. It was easy to say that he was just making use of her, but hadn't he transferred her death tribulation onto himself? The death tribulation was already on his karmic natal chart. Despite all his intelligence, it wouldn't stop it from entering his body. I really don't understand you. It was the first time the little azure dragon completely couldn't understand Ling Yan's thoughts. He had planned for so long just to obtain the spirit of chaos. What use did the spirit of chaos have to him? Since you don't understand, keep on watching. Someday you'll get it, Ling Yan said lightly as he walked out of the Hall of Gloom. As he passed by the main hall, the little white tiger suddenly flashed past him as it flew into the main hall. Enchanting had been afraid that the little white tiger would get involved, so she had locked it in her room. Chapter 2088, Clone 1. Enchanting wanted to speak but realized that she couldn't move a single muscle. The gold chain around her was completely restraining her entire body. Although she was conscious, she couldn't move or speak and felt just like a statue. You're already tired. The middle-aged man retracted his gaze and looked at the boy. The boy said respectfully, yes. I tested her strength when I found her, and it is inferior. The inferior Enchanting was lost for words. Of course, no one cared about her opinion. The boy continued, but I didn't know how to handle it, so I could only ask you for help. The middle-aged man nodded slightly. Elder, is she really the one who separated from the Holy Lord? The boy looked at Enchanting as he asked the middle-aged man. The elder nodded and said, you're right. Many people look similar to each other in this world, but none that look exactly the same. No matter how alike people may appear to each other, their figure, features, and bone structure will all have some slight differences. They wouldn't be exactly the same, even if they tried to alter themselves. They could always change their appearance but not their bone structure. The elder had already taken a look at her bones when she was bound by the golden chain and had confirmed that it was exactly the same. For someone to be identical to this degree, they could only be the person themselves, or a clone. We've been looking for this clone all these years. Who would have thought that she had hidden in the first domain? No wonder there were no signs of her when we were searching the second domain. How clever of her. Enchanting listened to their conversation silently as it surprised her. Holy Lord. What did he mean by a clone? I heard that this clone appeared in the mainland where the Crimson League was over 10,000 years ago. After that, she gathered a group of undead clan members and built the Temple of Shadows. But she suddenly shifted everything to the first mainland after the Temple of Shadows was built. The boy repeated everything he had heard from me. As Enchanting listened in on their conversation, she started picking up on some hints. It seemed that these two people had come from a strong power in the second domain. They were powerful enough to suppress the Crimson League and the Heavenly Wolf sect easily. And the one leading this power was the Holy Lord they were speaking of. A long time ago, their Holy Lord of Shadows had an accident which created a clone. The clone had escaped amid all the chaos to another mainland and created the Temple of Shadows in secret. Did that mean that the Holy Lord of Shadows was a clone? She was shocked by this news. The mighty Holy Lord of Shadows in the first domain was a mere clone. How terrifying was the main body then? She hadn't understood why the Holy Lord of Shadows had wanted to leave the second domain if she was so powerful that she would be at the top even in the second domain. But now she understood. So it turned out the Holy Lord of Shadows was running away. No wonder. The boy had given her such a request the first time they met. He had probably already been suspicious of her identity. Chapter 2089, Clone 2, Enchanting just couldn't figure out one particular thing. Since he could already confirm that she was a clone, why did he have to go the extra mile and challenge her? But now, what could she do? Enchanting could only stand there without doing anything, even when she was filled with doubts. After all, these two people were far more powerful than her. She had no chances of escaping at all. They continued talking about other matters, not even bothering to hide anything from Enchanting. Like that, Enchanting was completely disregarded. She didn't pose any threat to them. They were that confident because of the disparity in their powers. Enchanting could somehow infer from their conversation that their Holy Lord, the original one, was already dead. As for the Holy Lord of Shadows, Mo Yao, they couldn't condone her existence and would do anything to make her vanish. They respected their almighty Holy Lord and wanted to erase this dark history. Enchanting was speechless. She needed a chance to explain. Very quickly, the six-winged fire phoenix took them away from the first domain and they headed to the second domain. As Enchanting stepped into the second domain in this lifetime, it was with complicated feelings. She had been escaping for her life her previous lifetime, only to avoid those people eyeing the heart of heavenly Tao and to avoid being killed by Yu. This lifetime, she finally stepped into the second domain again, but she was abducted over. The six-winged fire phoenix flew over the mainland, and when Enchanting lowered her head to look, she could barely see any land or sea. It was flying so fast that everything was a mere blur to the point that it was stifling. After some time, the six-winged fire phoenix flew past an expanse of the sky that was filled with clouds. A mainland suddenly appeared before Enchanting's eyes. Whenever the six-winged fire phoenix flew past, the flying creatures would dodge, lowering themselves to fly beneath the six-winged fire phoenix with respect. After flying past almost an entire mainland and alternating between daylight and moonlight, Enchanting saw a mountain. It was a mammoth mountain that seemed to stretch into the heavens. The mountain itself had a weird appearance. While completely white, there wasn't any snow on it. It seems to be a mountain that was made up of white minerals. At the peak of the mountain, among the foggy sky, she saw a white palace. Suddenly, Enchanting felt a sense of déjà vu: white mountains, foggy sky, and that white palace. In her past lifetime, Enchanting might have overheard someone talking about a place that was similar to this while escaping the second domain. It was known as the Temple of Paragon, one of the greatest powers in the second domain. The Temple of Paragon was frighteningly powerful. No one knew exactly how powerful they were, but according to rumors, not many are able to see the Temple of Paragon with their own eyes. Could it be? Enchanting looked at the scene before her eyes and something came into her mind. The Temple of Paragon. Only those from the Temple of Paragon were capable of instantly killing people from the Heavenly Wolf sect. Did that mean the Holy Lord they were talking about was the Holy Lord of the Temple of Paragon? As for the Holy Lord of Shadows, she was a clone. Chapter 2090, Clone 3. This news was simply too much for her to take in now. Enchanting would be glad to be taken into the Temple of Paragon, if only she wasn't in such a state. Many powerful people would fight to enter this shrine. The six-winged fire phoenix landed outside the palace. Shortly after, a figure came from above, landing in front of the palace. It was a good-looking, winged being. The white palace made his wings appear even more pure and flawless. Enchanting had seen quite a number of winged people in the central mainland and the second domain, even in her past lifetime and current lifetime. She knew that once the winged people had achieved a certain level of capability, they would start growing silver-colored feathers in the insides of their wings. The feathers wouldn't be noticeable in normal periods, however, when they spread their wings, especially under the sunlight, the insides of their wings would sparkle just like stars in the sky. Even the most powerful winged person Enchanting had met in her precious lifetime only had 3 silver feathers. This winged person in front of her. Enchanting was about to be blinded by the dazzling feathers in the insides of his wings. He had a full set of silver feathers. Everyone from the Temple of Paragon was extraordinary. Greetings, Elder Bai. The other elders and guardians have been waiting in the main hall for quite some time, the winged person said politely. The elder nodded and with a light tap of a finger, a mysterious power compelled her to fly over. The winged person stood aside, lowering his eyes and not daring to look. The huge palace doors swung open, and Enchanting's eyes were almost blinded by the dazzling scene before her. The next moment, she appeared in an enormous palace. She couldn't recall exactly how she entered the palace. Scanning the room covertly, she tried to look behind at the palace doors behind her. However, all she could see was rays of bedazzling light. Was this a parallel universe? Enchanting was taken aback. After experiencing the deity ocean's twisted space, Enchanting could sense a transfer between time and space, and she had sensed the same feeling earlier on. The Temple of Paragon's palace appeared to be built on the peak of a mountain. However, this door seemed to connect to the parallel universe. Enchanting was astonished. How much power did they require to be able to transform a parallel universe into a powerful palace and control time and space? It was no wonder no one knew a thing about the Temple of Paragon. Even if they risked their lives and climbed onto the peak of the mountain to barge into the Temple of Paragon, they would be completely ruined by the parallel universe's twisted power after opening the door. Enchanting could already sense the terrifying difference between the second domain's most powerful forces and the first domain's powers shortly after stepping into the Temple of Paragon's main hall. The disparity between the two was colossal, to the extent that they were simply incomparable. No wonder even the powerful Holy Lord of Shadows had to escape. In the main hall, facing the direction of the door, there were 12 steps on the stairs towards a throne, with descending widths. There were 6 other chairs with inscriptions 3 steps beneath the throne, with 3 on each side. The 7 seats were empty. There wasn't a single person in the huge palace, except for Enchanting and the 2 people who had brought her there. The winged person clearly said that a few elders and guardians had been waiting for some time. Why was there no one to be seen? Enchanting was puzzled. Chapter 2091, Soul-Absorbing Stage 1. Right when Enchanting was still feeling puzzled, an old-sounding voice suddenly rang in the empty main hall. It's her. Enchanting couldn't see anyone speaking, but the voice in question seemed to drift into her ear, as though someone was speaking right beside her ear. Elder Bai nodded. Yes. Looking at her, I believe we've got the right person. No one else can imitate our Holy Lord's bone structure to this extent. This clone escaped back then, but now, we've finally found her. I think that we can answer to our late Holy Lord now. What has this clone been doing over the years? Another voice started talking. It was a female's voice, sounding somewhat casual. Elders, the young man who brought Enchanting and began to report on everything regarding the Holy Lord of Shadows to a non-existent audience in the main hall. His expression was serious, as though the elders stood right in front of him. However, Enchanting, she couldn't see a single person. How much stranger could the Temple of Paragon get? How dare a mere clone claim to be a Holy Lord? Forget it. Since we've already caught her, let's just forget what she did in the past. We should just send her to the soul-absorbing stage, according to the Holy Lord's instructions, and get rid of her. At this moment, Enchanting was still bound by the gold chains. She couldn't move, neither could she talk. She could only listen to them discussing how to deal with her as though she were non-existent. There were at least 7 different voices, but she could not see a single person. Where were they? Elder Bai, we'll have to trouble you to take her to the soul-absorbing stage. All right. Elder Bai nodded and he tapped the ground with his feet. A ball of light suddenly appeared beside Enchanting and Elder Bai's feet. The light blurred the entire scene before Enchanting's eyes. When the light finally dissipated, Elder Bai, Enchanting and the young man appeared at a platform in the palace. A mysterious, yet creepy-looking altar appeared on the platform, with radiant balls surrounding it. The balls wouldn't stop emitting illusory forces that seemed to play with the mind. Enchanting was speechless. Couldn't they give her a chance? At least a chance to explain herself. She couldn't say a single word to defend herself nor move even the slightest bit. The people at the Temple of Paragon presumed she was the clone of the Temple of Paragon's Holy Lord. They didn't bother to give her an opportunity to explain herself and had already given her the death sentence. Elder, are we going to use this soul-absorbing stage to make this clone disappear? A man asked. The soul-absorbing stage had already existed when the Temple of Paragon was being built. As for the others at the Temple of Paragon, they rarely had the chance to witness the use of the soul-absorbing stage. Of course, Elder Bai said. If it's just an ordinary person's clone, we can easily destroy them. However, she is the Holy Lord's clone, so we cannot use ordinary methods. This soul-absorbing stage is able to absorb all clones. No matter how powerful the clone is, the soul-absorbing stage can crush them before sending them into the illusory space and they'll completely disappear. But this clone is not that powerful. She's at most a holy venerate. Isn't it wasteful to use the soul-absorbing stage for a clone of this level? Chapter 2092, Soul-Absorbing Stage, 2, Elder Bai shook his head. Even if she's not powerful, she's a clone of our Holy Lord. Our Holy Lord already instructed us to send her to the soul-absorbing stage once we found her. This is an order, we have to abide by it. Once he said that, with a light wave of an arm, Enchanting was pushed into the soul-absorbing stage. The moment she entered the soul-absorbing stage, the light balls started moving. They started surrounding the soul-absorbing stage, forming lightning bolts to strike Enchanting. She was doomed. After all she had been through, Enchanting had never expected herself to just die like that after a rebirth. Elder Bai stood beside the soul-absorbing stage and he just watched as the lightning surrounded Enchanting. He was waiting for this clone to disappear. Enchanting thought that it would hurt badly once the lightning struck her. But she quickly noticed that it didn't seem to hurt. Although the lightning seemed terrifying as it struck at her, it was strange. She thought that it would hurt terribly, but she didn't feel a thing. In fact, the breeze brushing across her would be even more noticeable than this lightning. Enchanting had a complicated expression. From what they said earlier, they seemed to not have utilized the soul-absorbing stage for a very long time. Was it faulty? Elder Bai hadn't noticed yet. He just thought that Enchanting wasn't struggling because she was restricted by the gold chains. But time passed. Enchanting stood in the middle of the soul-absorbing stage and nothing seemed to be happening, different from what they had expected. It appeared that she wasn't the least bit tortured. Elder Bai, why is there no reaction? The young man was puzzled. Elder Bai's brows knitted and he didn't say a word. After some time, even after the lightning struck multiple times, she remained unfazed. Seeing this, Elder Bai's expression darkened. Why is it like that? The soul-absorbing stage would never go faulty. The soul-absorbing stage was personally built by the Holy Lord. It had never had issues ever since the Temple of Paragon was built. But now, the unthinkable had happened. Elder Bai could somehow sense that something went wrong. Noticing that Enchanting wasn't affected by the soul-absorbing stage at all, he lifted his arm and dragged Enchanting out from the soul-absorbing stage. Return to the main hall. Elder Bai's voice was cold, and the next moment, white light appeared beside his feet. Enchanting only saw some white light flash, and when she opened her eyes, she was back in the main hall again. Elder Bai stood beside her, with a solemn expression on his face. Elder Bai, why haven't you killed this clone yet? The same voices rang in the empty hall. They seemed to be puzzled when they realized that Enchanting hadn't been disposed of. Their voices were filled with displeasure. I put her on the soul-absorbing stage and she stood there for an entire hour without even losing a strand of hair, Elder Bai reported with a cold expression on his face. Once he said that the entire main hall fell silent. After some time, a ray of red light appeared on the wall of the main hall. A tall figure suddenly came out of one of the portraits hanging on the wall. Chapter 2093, Soul-Absorbing Stage, 3, Enchanting was speechless. What was going on in the Temple of Paragon? How could someone walk out of a portrait? Elder Bai, you're saying that the soul-absorbing stage doesn't work on her? An ethereal beauty walked out of the portrait. Her skin was fair and she walked over, her skirt trailing behind her. She walked over to Enchanting and her charming almond-shaped eyes riveted on Enchanting. Enchanting could recognize her voice, it was the female voice that she had heard previously. Yes, for now, Elder Bai replied. The woman bent over slightly to look at Enchanting with a sharp gaze. She was quite tall, her height almost comparable to that of a man. That shouldn't be the case. The soul-absorbing stage is able to destroy any clone that exists, including our Holy Lord's clone. Elder Yu, do you remember that we used the soul-absorbing stage to destroy one of our Holy Lord's clones back then? Once she said that another deep male voice was heard. Of course. We accompanied our Holy Lord to send the clone up to the soul-absorbing stage back then. Elder Bai, did anything strange happen when you sent her onto the stage earlier? Elder Hua turned around to ask Elder Bai. Elder Bai shook his head. It was the same as when our Holy Lord did it back then. How peculiar. Elder Hua's almond-shaped eyes narrowed. Her eyes riveted on the gold chains that trapped Enchanting. She suddenly lifted her arm, tapping on the chains lightly with her fingertip, and the gold chains just turned into light, diffusing into the air. Elder Hua. Elder Bai was stunned. Since we can't figure out the reason, why don't we just let this clone explain herself? She's already back in the Temple of Paragon, she couldn't possibly escape in front of us. Elder Hua smiled. Elder Bai didn't say a word, he merely looked at Enchanting with a cold expression. The moment the gold chains disappeared, Enchanting was relieved. She felt as though she had gotten rid of an ill omen, and it felt really good. Looking at Elder Bai and Elder Hua, who were both staring at her, Enchanting quickly came up with a plan. Hold on, you must be mistaken. I'm not the clone that you're looking for, Enchanting said. She had to face this eventually. Since she had taken over the Holy Lord of Shadows' Temple of Shadows, she had to take on the identity of the Holy Lord of Shadows also. But she didn't want to just die here. Enchanting was aware that she couldn't escape from the Temple of Paragon with her capabilities. Especially when they were bent on destroying her. That's all you have to say. The corners of Elder Hua's lips kicked up, she seemed to have already predicted what Enchanting was going to say. I have no idea how you got away from the soul-absorbing stage, but do you really think that we'll believe you when just self-proclaimed that you're not a clone? I'm speaking the truth. I'm really not a clone, Enchanting replied. She could never admit it. Once she did, she would die. Seeing that the two elders weren't convinced, Enchanting instantly spoke up again. I speak the truth and only the truth. I'm sure that everyone at the Temple of Paragon is capable enough to distinguish whether I'm a clone or not. Chapter 2094, Reincarnation 1. Enchanting could only go all out. If they were still convinced that she was the clone, they wouldn't even need the soul-absorbing stage. They could easily destroy her with their capabilities. This was her last chance. You think that I'm a clone just because I look like your holy lord. However, there are many people who look alike. No one can prevent such coincidences, Enchanting explained. The soul-absorbing stage is able to destroy all clones, but it just doesn't work on me. Isn't this enough proof? Elder Hua was originally just casually listening, but with the mention of the soul-absorbing stage, she grew suspicious. She didn't say anything and just gave Elder Bai a look. There are bound to be differences between clones and real humans. If we're going to investigate it, I'm sure we will have an outcome, Elder Bai said. Clones could bleed and have a consciousness of their own, however, there was one thing that could distinguish them from humans. Elder Bai and Elder Hua exchanged glances. Elder Hua slowly opened her hand and a pink lotus flower appeared on her palm. Grabbing onto Enchanting's arm, Elder Bai made an incision on her hand using a dagger. Fresh blood dripped onto the lotus flower. The lotus flower started emitting gold lights. It took just a split moment for Elder Hua and Elder Bait to be confused. How could this be? The lotus flower was Elder Hua's Dharma artifact, it could discern all truth. If she was a clone, once her blood touched the lotus flower would close. If she was a human, the lotus flower would radiate. Elder Bai's face darkened when he saw it. He was convinced that he had captured the clone that had escaped for years. As Enchanting watched their expressions, she could already surmise the outcome. I've said that I'm not a clone. Elder Bai's brows furrowed, not quite willing to believe it. That's impossible. You appeared right at the same time when our Holy Lord's clone escaped. Our Holy Lord decided to make you part of the undead clan when you were created. Enchanting's eyes lit up and she smiled. Undead clan. Would the undead clan bleed? Elder Bai was stunned at Enchanting's words. He was preoccupied with suspecting Enchanting's identity that he forgot the undead clan would never bleed. You're not part of the undead clan. That's impossible. The Holy Lord of Shadows is part of the undead clan, Elder Bai said. Enchanting heaved a sigh of relief when she heard what he said. All along she had been waiting for this sentence. I never said that I was the real Holy Lord of Shadows. What? This is a misunderstanding. I'm not the real Holy Lord of Shadows, I just resemble her. The Holy Lord of Shadows disappeared more than 10,000 years ago. Her disappearance caused the Temple of Shadows predicament in the central mainland. They needed someone to represent the Holy Lord of Shadows. Enchanting sounded convincing. If you're not convinced, you can check my bone age. You can say that I faked everything else, but I can never fake my bone age. I'm only a normal human and I'm not older than 20. With that, Enchanting stretched her arm out to let them inspect it. It's possible that after going through rounds of reincarnation, there would be partial memory loss. The Guardian riveted his gaze on Enchanting right after he spoke. Exact appearance, unique bone structure, and more than 300 years of memories. He bent over slightly to look right at Enchanting. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.